Section 1. The Mockery. First encounters with an odd British contraption. March 3, 1943. Western approaches, 320 miles west of Ireland. Spray knives across HMS Starling's forecastle as the bow rises and falls like a bellows. In the wheelhouse, Captain Frederick John Johnny Walker, Royal Navy, cap set low, scarf tucked tight, leans over the Aztec repeater. The ping-paw's ping rhythm hums in his bones. Outside, wind whistles along the handrails, and the deck crew brace around a strange, hedgehog-shaped frame bolted just forward of the breakwater. 24 stubby spigots pointing skyward at awkward angles. You watch a signaller wipe sleet from a signal lamp and think, if you didn't know better, you'd mistake the thing for a garden ornament. Range steady, the Aztec operator murmurs. Bears green 10, contact firm. Walker's reply is quiet. Hold her, we'll creep. He glances at the new rig on the bow, and we'll prick him. Below the gale, 180 feet down in the green-black, Oberleutnant Zerzi Heinrich Breyer of U-Boat U stands in the control room, wet wool pressing cold against his neck. Battery fumes sting. Through the faint creaks of pressure hull and the far-off thrum of Atlantic surf, the boat drinks in sound through its hydrophones. The petty officer on the phones grins and makes a quick little prickly gesture with his hands, needles sticking out, eliciting a chuckle from the navigator. "Eigel," someone says, "the Hedgehog." Word has salted the mess decks of the U-boats. The English have some new toy that lobs little bombs ahead of the ship instead of rolling depth charges astern. The older hands call it a gimmick. "Let them toss their fireworks," the navigator says. "We go deep, we live." Up on Starling, Walker's gunnery officer checks the safety pins. The new weapon is in a head-thrown spigot mortar. Each steel dart carries a compact Torpex charge capped with a simple contact fuse. No timed detonation, no hydrostatic trigger. If they hit nothing, they do nothing. No rumbling pressure waves, no froth. Silence. That's the point. With depth charges, the ocean itself erupts, deafening the ship's ears and the sonar screen, just when the hunter needs to listen. With the Hedgehog, the ocean stays quiet unless you've struck steel. Huff-duff bearings came an hour earlier, a fleeting spark of high-frequency chatter from the pack. A squall closed, then a lift in the weather revealed a false crest, something just wrong on the water. Type 271 radar hesitated. Then the Aztec found what Walker had been smelling all morning. A long, thin echo, wobbling, trying to slide out of the cone. The escort group, the second support group, has been tailored like a spearhead. Starling leads. Wild goose, woodpecker, wren, and kite spread in a fan. They are not hugging a convoy tonight. They are hunting. "Stand by, Hedgehog." The words are new enough that they still feel absurd. The deck crew crouch. A wave slaps the bow. Icy water sloshes across boots. The Aztec operator calls, "Bearing fine, steady closing, range, 150. The helmsman feathers the wheel. The ship's tremble becomes a steady thrum. "Fire!" A cough, like a chorus of giant corks, pops from the bow. 24 projectiles arc out, feathers of spray marking their departure. They describe a parabolic bloom. 2 rings, inner and outer, and vanish into the heaving gray. 200 yards ahead, time to fall, where the Aztec says the U-boat will be when they arrive. The bridge waits. The only sounds are wind and hull, and the relentless ping, ping, ping. Nothing. No thunder, no hollow boom rising through the stern plates, no bubbling white scars on the sea. Just rollers and spin drift, and the Aztec trace reappearing as clean as a pencil line. Walker's jaw moves once, a small muscle tick. "Miss," he says softly. And the operator, now that the ocean hasn't exploded, can calmly keep the contact. The helmsman adjusts 2 degrees. The engineer feeds a hair more to the turbines. The next attack can begin without the 1-minute deafness that always made follow-ups with charges a guess. Below, Breyer smirks. The crew exchange glances. Feuerwerk, see? The boat's carpenter crosses himself anyway. A petty officer checks the depth gauge. The pointer trembles at 180, then creeps. The captain orders a tiny change in course, a drift to slide out from under the cone. It has worked before. The English, the Americans, everyone throws their barrels where you were, not where you're going. And every time those charges thunder, their own ears go blind for the critical half-minute. That's when you slip away, bubbles streaming, listening to the search fade behind you. But on Starling, the Aztec trace snaps back immediately and holds. No thunder, no blindness. Walker hears the contact clean. "He's still there," the operator says, calm as a clerk. Walker nods. "Again." The gunnery officer has already reloaded. The Hedgehog spigots, each with its own squat bomb, cycle up. Racks dump from the ready-use locker. Crews move like a drill team in oilskins. No delay, no guesswork. The ship, instead of circling to pass over a point astern, points its knife-straight bow at the phantom ahead and hurls its stings into the water where the echo will be, not where it used to be. On the second attack, the ocean takes a breath. And then one sound, small, sharp, intimate, punches through the gale like a door slam under a cathedral roof. A single hard crack, then a second, then a bird third. Distinct. Not the long, woolly roll of a charge. The bridge crew exhale as one. Walker doesn't smile. "Mark those," he says. "Put her right back in." Below, a light bulb above the attack table bursts. Somewhere aft, a rivet whistles like a kettle. A man cries out, the sound snatched by the hull and swallowed with the sea. You look at the Hedgehog's empty spigots, smoking faintly in the cold, and understand why the U-boat men joked. It seemed too small a thing to kill a submarine. But the ocean is made of equations, not opinions. And tonight, the math has shifted. Section 2. The realization. Why silence became deadly. The third contact fuse snaps, and the pressure hull of WWII flexes like a bell. Oberleutnant Breyer grips the chart table with his bare, wet hands, knuckles blanching. The control room lights flicker, then steady. Dust, fine steel rust and salt crystals, sifts from cable runs overhead. A petty officer is already shouting damage reports. "Forward battery compartment, shock, minor leaks, packing gland weeps." The engineer's voice rides over him. "Keep her level." The boat rocks, tilts a degree, then rights. They were not explosions in the old sense. They were fists, precise and intimate, striking home only where metal met metal. Breyer has heard the talk in Lorient and Saint-Nazaire. The English toy that does nothing unless it touches you. He did not believe the second part, that by doing nothing if it missed, it allowed the enemy to hear you, to keep you pinned, to tune their next throw. He believes it now. "WWII," he says, quiet but iron. He points with 2 fingers, the U-boat captain's spear. "Course 171, Zweigradstrasse nach Steuerbord, depth 210. The helmsman repeats. Pumps kick. The boat groans like a living thing. On the surface, Starling surges. The deck crew reload without hurry. They are practiced, and the wind tears at their hoods. The Hedgehog's firing arcs, an inner ring and an outer ring overlapping into a flower, are plotted by the Aztec officer and a young lieutenant with a pencil and a set of curves clipped to a board. "He's turning," the Aztec operator says. "Tiny starboard." Walker knows the tricks. Feints, drifts, feathery rudder work to slide just out of pattern. That is why the Hedgehog's pattern is wider than one man's guess, because the ocean is a liar. Fire. Breyer hears the second arrival, not as noise, but as a change in the boat's pulse. The dots that are his enemies, faint, distant thuds of entry and then nothing, are everywhere and nowhere. He feels more than hears a rodent scurry in the bilge, a spanner rolling. Then, again, 2 impacts, sharp as pistol shots right in the jaw. A seam in the forward pump housing spits salt water. A crack of gray-green moves across a paint flake like a lightning bolt. The engineer barks for rags, clamps, grease. Men move without shouting. The boat was made for depth-charge storms, long rolling beatings that rattle plates and mollify with the slow crescendo of sound. This new punishment is surgical. It tells you what you did wrong by stabbing you for it. In Liverpool, the men who trained Walker's group explained the arithmetic. Depth charges demand you give up your ears. The thunder of your own attack blinds your sonar. You must wheel away, count seconds, imagine where the enemy has gone, then rush back into your guess. The ocean, pleased to help the weaker party survive, mixes the wake with the thermocline and smears everything into noise. With Hedgehog, the sea remains a listening room. No boom, no blindness. If you miss, you keep talking to the target. If you hit, well, a single contact fuse and a concentrated Torpex punch cracks a pressure frame, dents a tank, buckles a plate. 3 or 4 such blows in the same minute and the hull's safety margins collapse. Walker watches water feather over the bow, listening to the Azdic in the soft hum of the bridge. A room full of men who have learned to hear through steel. Hold contact, he says, though everyone knows they have it. Again. In the wardroom weeks ago, the slang had bounced around the mugs. Mousetrap, lawn darts, pepper pot. Sailors joked to cure fear. But they had also studied Captain Walker's doctrine. Creeping attacks. One escort holds the contact at slow speed, while another, guided by steady bearings and soft hands, slides in to deliver. Hedgehog makes creeping attacks faster, cleaner, repeatable. Walker has chased U-boats for hours. Wearing them down like a fox worries a burrow, never losing the whisper on the set. Sometimes charges battered them until the sea itself seemed to ring. Sometimes the ocean answered with silence. With Hedgehog, the silence is your ally. Breyer orders more depth. The needle crawls. Condensation beads on the periscope well, dances. Halt bei 230, he says. He thinks of his men, a baker's son, a Swabian farmhand who hates cows, a former machinist who can fix anything with wire and language, and feels the peculiar pity that commanders discover at sea. He also thinks of the briefings that told him to mock the Hedgehog. Under his boots, a tiny ringing, fine, crystalline, sings from the pressure hull between frames. He does not mock. The third salvo falls. A pattern Walker has shifted 5 degrees to starboard, just a hair. The Azdic operator calls, "Contact steady, range 110, closing." The deck crew, faces raw and chapped, look not at the splash, but at the old man's back. He does not lean. He has stopped leaning in war. He stands. He breathes. He trusts the math and the training and a weapon that does not waste your ears. 3 impacts this time, 1 front, 1 amidships, 1 like a hammer in the tail. On you terms, a man is flung against a valve wheel and leaves a red kiss on gray paint. A main motor squeals. The first bubbles stream, tiny pearls rising from somewhere aft. The stern plane shaft stuffing box, perhaps, or a scab on a ballast tank. The engineer knows that sound, that feel. The boat losing its tightness. and stares at Briar. The captain returns the stare and shakes his head minutely. No panic. Not yet. Hard to port, he orders quietly. Blow negative to neutral. Maintain. He is buying seconds, hoping for a thermal layer, a smudge of water so different in temperature that it bends the Englishman's sound waves away. This, too, has worked before, with charges, with men who go deaf after they strike. Above him now is a hunter who has learned not to close his eyes when he swings. Mark those. Walker's voice is almost tender. He's hurt. He keeps the bow on because a wounded thing will jink in circles. The hedgehog's spigots reset again, as if this mechanical hedgehog, bristling and implacable, has sniffed the blood in the water and raised its quills higher. The ocean's face is an iron hide, but the math beneath it keeps changing. Section 3, the turning point. From convoys enduring to convoys hunting. April storms, then May. Black May, the U-boat arm will call it. When the Atlantic begins to tilt, not on one day and not for one reason, but with a collection of small small merciless inventions, all working together. Centimetric radar that sees periscopes and snorkels prick the surface. HFDF that catches a wolf's howl before the pack forms. Lee lights on aircraft that turn night to noon, and, strapped to the bows of sloops, frigates, and destroyer escorts, the Hedgehog, whose silence is a blade. The convoys still stretch from horizon to horizon, freighters slamming the sea-like doors. But their shepherds have put away some of their fear and picked up a hunter's patience. Captain Walker's second support group perfects a style of pursuit that U-boat captains will remember in their sleep. He keeps a contact through hours of slow dance in weather that would splinter a pier, creeping with one ship holding the echo while a partner slides in for the kill. He does it with depth charges when he must. But with Hedgehog, he can wound and wound again. Each follow-up guided by sound, as clear as a metronome. His sloops, starling, wild goose, woodpecker, wren, and kite, move like packhounds. In the wardrooms, young officers stop laughing at the porcupine on the bow. Across the ocean, American destroyer escorts, many built in yards that learn to turn out ships like rows of corn. Ship the same forward-firing weapon. It looks ungainly on a DE's trim prow. But in drills, the rhythm becomes a habit. Sonar bearing, range call, a head throw pattern. No deafness, re-attack before the ocean smudges the trace. On a cold night east of Newfoundland, a DE's captain, whiskered with frost, grips the bridge rail and feels the ship rise under him with each sea, aiming the Hedgehog like a pistol. The U-boat he stalks never hears a charge's roar. Only the sudden sharpness of contact fuses finding steel. You, any viewer standing on that bow in imagination, feel what changes in men when their tools finally match their intent. For 3 years, escorts endured, clattered over submarine shadows and through depth charge curtains like prayers, then circled back blind, hoping, listening, convinced that the sea was on the other side. By 1943, the escorts discover they can decide fights. Their weapons let them keep talking to the enemy while striking at him, and their radios and radar let them bring more hands into the conversation. The convoy lane becomes, slowly, an ambush. A U-boat captain sits in the stale light of his bridge at base, writing a letter before sailing. He makes a joke. If we meet the little Hedgehog, we'll scratch its belly, because men joke when they fear. In the operations room, staff officers know better. Reports pile in from boats that survived by inches. Impacts like hammer blows on frames 48 to 52. No detonations unless contact attacks, followed within minutes by another pattern. Sonar contact maintained throughout. One grim memo notes that the new British mortar has turned the ocean quiet in the attacker's favor. Walker steams where the pack once gathered most confidently. The Bay of Biscay's edges, the lanes east of the Grand Banks, the approaches to Ireland. And he hits and hits. In January 1944, his group will pull off an astonishing week of kills. But the turning has already happened in months like March and April 1943, when escorts ceased to be merely shields. He still uses charges. There are times when only a pattern ripped down the water column will do. But the Hedgehog becomes the opener, the finder, the scalpel. When one projectile's contact fuse meets the curved skin of a pressure tank, the boat feels it in its bones. The men feel it in theirs. On board an American escort that spring, a sonar man named Lewis learns to hear the difference between an undamaged submarine and one that has started to sigh air. Bubbles, he tells his chief. The faintest scratch in the return, a modulation, a softness. And the chief nods. Put it on. The captain puts it on. The Hedgehog blooms over the bow and vanishes ahead. Silence answers. Then a crack, and silence again. They do not cheer. They mark, they turn, they come again. The ocean is not theirs. But for an hour at a time, for a patch of water a mile across, it yields up its secret. Breyer's last minutes, like those of many of his fellows, will not involve the cinematic role of a stricken boat throwing men to the deck in a roaring storm of depth charges. Instead, there is that crystalline, private violence, hits that feel like a mailed fist punching the wall beside your head, and then a slow loss of options. Pumps race, not quite keeping pace. The stern sags. The boat grows heavy and takes a set, and in the mind of a man who has spent his life making metal do what it's told, there forms a horrible new respect for this small, silly-looking weapon he'd mocked. Up top, ice grows beards on the deck stanchions. Walker says very little. He does not need to say much. His officers and men have learned the musician's trick of listening while playing. They feel that the war at sea, which for so long has been a wrestling match in the dark, now includes a knife you can sharpen while you fight. Sometime in late spring, on a night when the moon lights the spray like glass shards, an escort throws its last harp of depth charges astern, and a petty officer who has been at sea since 1940 turns away from the roiling white boil and looks forward instead to the little animal crouched on the bow, quills raised, waiting for the next bearing. The wolf packs begin to wither not only from lost boats, but from confidence that leaks away like air from a damaged ballast tank. They surface less. They transmit less. They are found more. The ocean has not changed. But the arithmetic has, and men like Walker have learned to use it. The Hedgehog, once a punchline in a smoky wardroom, becomes a quiet, practical answer to a problem that nearly strangled Britain. And that is how convoys stopped merely surviving the night and began hunting it.